episode 440 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis. I'm here with
Andrew Swafford.
In today's episode, we're going to be talking about movies that we saw this week in part 1. And in part 2, we talk about Muppets 2011 and Muppets Most Wanted with Kermit Frog on Cinematary Bidcast.
Man, that sounds exactly like Zach Dennis.
No, I'm Zeke Dennis. I am a host of Cinematary Bidcast. I'm going to do all of part 2 in a Constantine, the most dangerous frog in the world accent. In
People who have not seen Muppets Most Wanted and don't know this accent are really missing out in life.
Yeah, we'll get into it. The movie's fine, but it's very much worth just watching them play Kermit as a Eastern Bloc criminal. But the Eastern Bloc criminal is like doing a Russian accent in a Kermit accent, and at one point he's
failing to do a Kermit impression.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. It's really it's like prime like Muppet stupidity. It's great. But first, let's go ahead and jump into some movies that we saw this week, and I feel like so Andrew, you got a bunch of new releases. I feel like you got the movie being talked about the most right now.
The movie of the moment.
Movie of the moment. That's what I was going at.
Is everybody's talking about it, which is true or not depending on how online you are, I guess. And that movie is Skinamarink by a first-time filmmaker, or this is his first feature film, director Kyle Edward Ball. And this is an odd movie. I'm going to attempt to describe it for you here. My first exposure to it was watching the trailer in a theater when I was going to see another movie. And let me describe the trailer first. So the trailer is mostly just pictures of corners and doorknobs and ceilings, just ecstatic shots of those things, kind of drenched in this dark blue light with a kind of a grainy filter over the top of it. And you keep hearing this voice that seems like it's introducing you to the concept of the movie. It keeps saying, "In this house." And it says it like, "In this house. In this house." Like that. But it says that... that would be a fun fan edit of this, I think. But yeah, so that's the trailer. That's how they're selling it. Like, it's just that, and I think a lot of people are seeing that trailer and thinking like, oh man, what could be in that house? Because they just keep saying, "In this house. In this house." And there's no predicate to that sentence, right? And so people are really hyped about this movie. It's gone viral on TikTok. It leaked a little while ago, which drummed up a lot of buzz about it. And I think a lot of mainstream audiences who are going to see this are being disappointed because the movie, it's not like the trailer is hiding something from you that the movie then reveals. No, that's just the movie. The movie is is just shots of corners and doorways and ceilings and stuff. There is kind of a story being told here. It's a story of two siblings. One of them is 4 and one of them is 7, I think. So very, very, very young kids in a house where the way that the director describes it and the way that the synopsis describes it is that they have woken up in their house and the doors and windows have disappeared. So they can no longer go outside. They are trapped in this house. Now, you would be forgiven for watching the movie and not getting that story because, again, you're looking at corners and stuff. But I think that there definitely is a plot to this movie. And it is somewhat open to interpretation, of course. There's a scene early on where we hear the children's father on the phone saying that one of the children has fallen down the stairs. And you can either interpret that as the child has hit their head and they have like suffered some sort of brain injury, and the rest of the movie is kind of their, mental, spiritual wandering as a result of that. Or I've also heard it interpreted as the child's father is abusive, and this is like a story that he's telling somebody else to cover up his own abuse of his children. And what you're seeing in the movie is the way it feels to be stuck in a house with an abusive caregiver. And so these children have woken up in the middle of the night. Doors and windows apparently have disappeared. They are scared, alone, can't find their parents, and they mostly post up in the living room and watch TV and play with Legos. Like, mostly you are kind of, you're from an arm's reach away, kind of like witnessing these kids play with Legos and watch TV. But you never really see the kids. You never really see their faces. You see basically no characters' faces in this movie. Everything that happens plot-wise is sort of implied by suggestion. And like all the dialogue you hear is coming from somebody who's just out of frame, just off screen. And so it's kind of an interesting experience to piece together and feel out what's happening in this movie and be sort of subsumed by the really intense atmosphere of the movie, because it is less a story of, one of my friends described it as like, it is less a story about a haunted house and more like what it would actually feel like to be in that house. You're not really going through any sort of standard genre plot beats. You're just sort of like stuck in this place in the same way that these characters are stuck in this place. And it's real disconcerting and can be, very unsettling. It is visceral, I would say. Like our friend of the pod, Mike Thorne, has talks about this phrase, affect horror. Like he prefers horror that like actually kind of rattles him fear-wise, right? And I think this is a movie that is going for that. It's less interested in traditional storytelling or thematics or anything like that, and more interested in just like giving you this sensation that these characters are having. And yeah, go ahead, Zach.
I was just gonna ask, like, just from the stills I've seen of it and just kind of the marketing and everything, it seems like this is at least a film, like as you're describing, experience-wise, that kind of has a kinship to Blair Witch and Paranormal Activity.
Yeah, so it's kind of in a way, the kind of Paranormal Activity movie that I've always wanted to see. When I watched Paranormal Activity, I talked about this on the podcast episode we did about it. I was so taken with that shot of the bedroom, like the blue tinted surveillance shot that they set up, where you're just watching these characters sleep and watching like the door slowly close and things like that. And I felt like, man, what I want is a Paranormal Activity movie that's directed by like Kiyoshi Kurosawa or a Pitchpong or a Sethical or Chantal Ackerman or somebody, right? And this is kind of that movie, where it's kind of Blair Witch if in Blair Witch you were mostly just looking at like the leaves as the characters were crunching through them, and you weren't really hearing a lot of their inane conversations. That
sounds honestly a lot better than listening to them talk in Blair Witch. So
that is miserable. truly. Now I've mostly described this as like a very, affecting, effective horror movie. But your mileage will definitely vary on this movie. My mileage varied throughout the runtime. I've kind of gone back and forth on it since watching it multiple times. Because you are the headspace that at least I was in while watching the movie kind of fluctuated back and forth between like, this is unsettling, this is scary, I feel unsafe, to I'm bored. When will something happen, right? Or like, I've seen this shot before, or in some cases, like, I'm annoyed because they do. Kyle Oderball does include a couple of jump scares, and they're pretty like cheap, manipulative jump scares, I gotta say. Like, it is interesting to me that this movie has blown up with like the TikTok Gen Z like meme culture, or like the creepypasta culture, because it does remind me of certain kind of low effort memes that I've seen. Are you familiar with like the ear rape memes, where they just like take a video with an audio file and then like at the very end they crank up the audio so loud that it hurts your ears? Like, that's what the jump scares are like in Skinamarink. And like, yeah, I jumped, like I audibly like gasped when these things happened, but it wasn't necessarily because the film was like moving me in any sort of way. It was more like I got stuck with a cattle prod. And like, of course I was going to jump when that happened, right? So having that experience with it, kind of going back and forth, like, is this cool and experimental and scary, or is this kind of boring and cheap and low effort and manipulative? I was trying to investigate that feeling for myself. So I went and listened to / watched a bunch of interviews with the director, Kyle Edward Ball. He also has a YouTube channel where he was making short films for several years before making this. And I unfortunately have to concur with a handful of folks on Letterboxd who have been writing about this. Kyle Edward Ball kind of gives off dumb guy energy. Like, I don't know the guy personally. I don't want to say he's unintelligent or he's a hack or anything like that. But like, this is a movie where your experience with it is totally subject to how charitable you want to be to the movie. Like, it's kind of an emperor has no clothes situation. Do you or do you not? Are you not like kind of willing to give yourself over to the movie and say like, oh yeah, this is actually really brilliant, as opposed to like, this is some inane bullshit. And when I listen to him talk, I kind of lean towards this is some inane bullshit. And I feel this more when I look through his YouTube channel. He had this channel called Bite Size Nightmares, where I think he started by filming a childhood nightmare that he had. He describes it in the video, and he's kind of making visualizations of his description as you're hearing the story. And it's like a 4-minute video, and it's mostly just a camera sort of floating through a darkened, empty house. And then all of a sudden there's a scary figure at the end, you know? And there's like 100 videos like that on his YouTube channel. And they all seem kind of the same. I haven't watched through all of them, but I've clicked through. He also has a bunch of videos that are like 3 hours long of like, their descriptions are like, you're in a house, but you're a dead child or something like that. You know, like you know, those videos of like Redbone, but you're in a bathroom at a party, you know, like just taking an audio thing that people are familiar with and putting a filter over it and saying it's art. Like that is kind of the vibe I get from some of Kyle Edward Ball's stuff. But like, I also gotta hand it to him that it can be really effective. So I am still not kind of waffly, not really sure where I'm going to land on this. But one thing that makes me admire Skinamarink more in some ways is I also watched his short film Heck. It was the longest thing he had done up until Skinamarink, other than like the 3-hour low effort YouTube loops. And Heck has been described as a proof of concept film for Skinamarink. And it is pretty identical, but instead of being an hour and 40 minutes, which Skinamarink is, and that's almost definitely way too long of a runtime for that movie, Heck is only 30 minutes. And so when I left Skinamarink and thought like, man, that was cool but too long. I was wondering, what would this guy's work look like in a shorter form? And Heck is really bad. I very much disliked it. Worse than Skinamarink by a wide margin. And I think it just goes to show how much like upping your production value can really do for a movie, because he's telling basically the same story for the most part, but the atmosphere is just so much stronger in Skinamarink than it is in Heck. That short is slightly different in that you're only following the one kid as opposed to two. The kid is looking for their mom as opposed to maybe afraid of their dad. There's also a really, I think, bullshitty manipulative reveal in the last 5 minutes of Heck where the kid says like, "Mommy, I'm sorry I got cancer," which just seems like a very easy way to give pathos to a film that wasn't actually generating pathos up until that moment.
That almost sounds like a joke. Like,
it sounds like a joke.
I'm sorry I got cancer.
And the last line of the movie is, "Mommy, I think we're in hell." And like, I think the title of the movie is a joke. Like, he's a kid, he wouldn't say hell, he would say heck. This is a movie about being in heck. It's just a little like cutesy, and it feels kind of lazy and cheap to me. But again, Skinamarink can really get under your skin, and in a horror landscape where like we're getting a lot of cookie cutter stuff, and B, a lot of it is so concerned with thematics about trauma and family and stuff, that it's not actually that concerned with scaring the audience. It's the current strain of horror is more interested in kind of asking the audience to trace an allegory than it is to like be viscerally affected by the craft of the movie. Skinamarink does that in spades. But again, it's not going to do that for everybody, and it may not do that for you like consistently through the course of the movie. But it is definitely worth seeing. It's crazy that it exists. It's crazy that it got distributed in multiplexes. Like, this is maybe the most avant-garde feature to ever play in as many multiplexes as it has. So I think that's cool that like people are just kind of being exposed to stuff. Kyle Edward Ball has said that one of his big inspirations was Wavelength by Michael Snow. And, no people who are going to multiplexes are not also going to watch Wavelength by Michael Snow. So like, that's cool. I'm very glad that it's kind of like, I don't know, breaking open the gates of like what can be done in like wide release horror. And I'm really curious to see what Kyle Edward Ball does next. He said in a couple of interviews that he has signed a deal with a pretty major distributor. I don't know if that means like A24 Neon or if that means like Paramount or Warner Brothers or something. I don't know. But he said that he is going to make another horror movie, and it's going to be out 2023 or 2024. So that will kind of be the litmus test for me as to like, does this guy actually have the juice or not? Like, can he make a movie that is not Skinamarink for another 2 hours? Because based on what his YouTube channel is, it seems like that's kind of all he's got in the tank. But we'll see. Like, I could be proven wrong, and this guy could be like one of the major new voices in horror moving forward. Who knows? But yeah, that's Skinamarink.
Will dummy Kyle Edward Ball not just be a dumb guy?
Who knows? Maybe I'm totally misreading him and being uncharitable and mean. And I hope that's the case.
I mean, honestly, if the guy name checks Wavelengths, by Michael Snow.
Yeah.
Like, he at least is somewhat interesting.
He's seen movies. He's cine literate. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll give him that. He seems much more like literate in movies than like some of these folks getting Oscar noms. So, you know, it's.
But he also talks about horror movies in a way, like horror specifically, in a way that almost sounds like somebody who's new to getting into the genre. And I'm sure that's not him, but like, you know, there's an interview where he talks about The Shining not being scary. It's more creepy, and creepy movies are better than scary movies. And like, it just feels like there's this weird air of like condescension that people often have towards the horror genre. Like, it's like I have to prove that I'm like better than the horror genre in some way, as opposed to being like a true admirer or fan of it. I don't know what this guy's deal is. We'll have to wait and see.
All right. Well, the jury's out on KEB, as they say. But Skinamarink, which sounds like a nursery rhyme, is it's in theaters now. So, speaking of stuff that's in, or was, speaking of movies that are in theaters now, if you have some place that has art house movies, Saint Omer, it seems to be like one of those, oh, you didn't see this last year, you missed out.
Well, I think the only people who saw Saint Omer last year were people who went to a couple select festivals. But it is now playing in some theaters. This movie is by another filmmaker who I've not seen anything else by, Alice Diop, I think is how you say her name. She's French.
Yeah. Her is it her sister? Maddie Diop did Atlantiques a couple years ago.
I didn't know that she was related to the Atlantiques.
Some sort of relation there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I actually have never seen that. Did you watch that movie? Yeah,
it's a cool movie.
I should watch it, especially if there's stylistic similarities with Saint Omer.
It's on Netflix.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's on Netflix.
Nice.
It was a Netflix release.
Well, anyways, I saw Saint Omer, and it is a really interesting movie. It is about a high-profile court case happening in this town called Saint Omer in France. And the court case is about a woman, a young mother, who murdered her baby. Baby was like a year and a half old. Mother took the baby to the beach, like in the middle of the night, and left the baby in the waves and let the baby be carried out into the ocean and die. And the baby eventually washes up on the shore. Somebody finds the baby. This lady gets tracked down, and she's on trial, and she admits to doing it. Like, first thing out of the gate, whenever she gets up on the witness stand, like, did you or did you not kill your baby? She's like, yeah, I killed my baby. But they ask her how she pleads, and she says she pleads innocent. And she claims that, like, she is not the one who is morally responsible for killing her baby. And they ask her, like, why she did it, and she says, well, that's what I hope to find out in the course of this trial. And the process of finding that out, both for her and for us, is a very fascinating one with lots of twists and turns. Now, I should also mention that this character, this mother, is not our point of view character in the movie. Our point of view character is another woman. They're both from Senegal, I think. But they're both living in France, and our point of view character is, I think, a film studies teacher. We get a scene of her teaching the movie Hiroshima Mon Amour to introduce us to her character, and like the lyrical poetry of the screenplay in Hiroshima Mon Amour. And we hear her deliver this like really beautiful, thoughtful, profound lecture. And then you barely hear her talk for the rest of the movie, because she travels to this town where the trial is going on, and you're mostly just watching her watch the trial. So it's there's interesting perspective in the movie where our eyes are on this event that's happening, but we're having to filter that event through the eyes of another character who we know very little about, and we don't find out that much about. But you can kind of tell that she's being moved by certain things that come up in the testimony, and that you can tell that she relates to this woman on some level. They have a lot of like eerie things in common with one another, just in their personal lives. The point of view character is currently pregnant and seems to be having some sort of second thoughts about her pregnancy or her marriage or something like that. And so you're kind of like not just listening to this really interesting crime story unfolding in front of you, but also sort of solving a mystery yourself of like, well, what is this crime story saying to this woman? And like, what am I learning about something even broader by connecting those dots? It is a very formally interesting movie. It sticks to just a handful of camera angles. When we are watching the mother on the stand, it is always just like one unbroken shot, and it always comes back to the same shot. Like you're always seeing her from the same perspective, and I think it's the perspective of the point of view character sitting in the stands. So it's not a flashy movie in terms of, you know, camera work that's like moving all over the place or doing any sort of fancy edits or something, but it's a movie that like makes you notice the formal choices that are being made because they're so insistent on like, this is the angle that we are viewing this scene from. And like, it is almost like we are being asked to focus less on the cinema and more on like the information. Like you are just like listening, looking at somebody's face, and in our case reading subtitles and like trying to piece together all this evidence yourself, as if you were a juror in a courtroom, which is a really interesting way to tell a story like this, I think. You know, a lot of courtroom dramas are pretty glamorized, I guess. There's a lot of like big Hollywood speechifying and stuff in them.
You can't handle the truth.
That kind of thing, right? This movie is not that. It's like very calm, very direct, kind of dry in a way, but the subject matter is so not that like you can't help but sort of be engrossed and sucked in and interested. At least that was my experience with it. I should also say that the performance of this mother, played by, oh man, I don't know if I can say this woman's name correctly, Jaslagi Malanda, incredible performance. She has been in a grand total of 2 movies. It looks like I have not seen her other movie, and like the choices that this woman makes in terms of like just playing this character so like deadpan confidently. Like she gets up on the stand and like looks directly at the judge and like never breaks eye contact with the judge, and just like admits to killing her baby and says like, yeah, I want to figure out why I did that. Like this courtroom is therapy for me. But like she has this extreme stoicism to her that kind of in sort of that like Bressonian way sort of implies greater depths than we're not seeing. And in the small moments where she does kind of break or reveal those depths, it can be really moving. So fantastic performance. There's also an interesting thing going on chronologically with the movie where every now and then we are getting snapshots of our POV character's childhood, but the movie doesn't really announce like it's flashback time. There's no musical cue or fade or anything like that. It's just all of a sudden we're watching something else, and we're not really given the context for that something else, and our job is to kind of figure out how this fits into the broader tapestry of this movie. So it is a movie that is like asking the audience to do a bit of intellectual work, but I never found that intellectual work to be like arduous at all. I was just like too interested and swept up in it to mind, I guess. I will also say, as a literature person, there are some really interesting literary connections that this movie has. I don't know if they're intentional literary connections or not, but of course, I can't help but think of Toni Morrison's Beloved, which is another a story about a Black woman murdering her children. And also Richard Wright's Native Son, which is a really interesting court drama that is like sort of the masculine equivalent of this movie's like weird feminine energy that it's got going on, where that book is about a man who has raped and beheaded a white woman, and like his lawyer essentially argues that he can't be held responsible because of like the material conditions of society. And like it's that novel is like a lengthy exploration of the possibility of that idea. And this movie seems to be trying to delve into similar thematic territory. And it's real good. People should see it. Saint Omer. Check it out.
Yeah. No, it's definitely one when it becomes available to me. I've been wanting to check it out because I've seen good stuff about it. Well, cool. Well, all right, we're gonna take a quick break, and then we're gonna take one final trip down Muppet Lane in part 2 after this.
Am I a man, or am I a Muppet? Am I a Muppet? If I'm a Muppet, then I'm a very manly Muppet. Very manly Muppet. Am I a Muppet? Or am I a man? Am I a man? If I'm a man, that makes me a Muppet of a man. A Muppet of a man. I look into these eyes, and I don't recognize the one I see inside.
And we're back with part 2 of episode 440 of Cinematary. In this part, we talk about the Muppets 2011 and Muppets Most Wanted. I can't do that the whole time. Directed by Jason Bobbin, from a script by Jason Segel and Nicholas Stoller. The film stars Segel, Amy Adams, Kermit the Frog, Fozzie Bear, Walter, Great Gonzo, Miss Piggy, and Chris Cooper. Walter, the world's biggest Muppet fan, is on vacation in Los Angeles with his brother Gary and Gary's girlfriend Mary. They discover that greedy Tex Richmond plans to raise Muppet Studios and drill for oil on the spot. Desperate to save the Muppets' former stomping grounds, the three friends join forces with Kermit to reunite Miss Piggy, Fozzie. Isn't that one of the jokes in this one? He's like, Fonzie.
I don't remember.
I think he keeps Constantine keeps calling Fonzie.
Oh, you're right. Yes.
To reunite Miss Piggy, Fozzie, and the rest of the gang to hold a telethon to raise the $10 million they need to save the studio. In 2008, Jason Segel and Nicholas Stoller pitched a concept for a Muppets film to Walt Disney Studios Executive Vice President of Production Karen Falk, and they were offered a deal to develop their script. In June 2008, Segel announced that he had turned in the first draft of his script and was hopeful that the film would live up to previous Muppets movies. Later in 2008, Stoller noted that he and Segel had written a, quote, old school Muppets movie where the Muppets have to put on a show to save the studio. In the same interview, Stoller also confirmed that they would get as many cameos and guest stars as possible, that Siegel would play a ventriloquist, which I don't think ever. He's just kind of a person.
No.
Originally,
He's a very Muppety man.
yeah. Or is he a very manly Muppet? We don't know.
Who can say?
Originally, the film was titled The Greatest Muppet Movie of All Time, and an early leak of the script suggested that it would feature celebrity cameos by Vince Vaughn, Jon Favreau, Christian Bale, Ben Stiller, Steve Carell, George Clooney, Jack Black, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Mel Brooks, Matt Damon, Anne Hathaway, Emily Blunt, Rachel Ray, Bob Saget, Lisa Lampanelli, Nelly, Jeff Ross, and Charles Grodin, which is just making me sad.
Blunt's in there.
She is in it. But I'm just like, can you imagine if they brought Charles Grodin back? I would have been so excited. And he just like rekindled his Miss Piggy relationship.
We were just talking off mic between parts about how it would be incredible if Charles Grodin was playing the Ricky Gervais part in Muppets Most Wanted.
Oh,
but he is unfortunately not.
Yeah, so much better. It would have been great. Another former title of the film was the cheapest Muppet movie ever made, after an unused script written by Jerry Jewell back in 1985. A cameo was written for the Sesame Street Muppet Elmo, but was rejected by Disney's attorneys and representatives from Sesame Workshop. Those legal battles between Sesame Street and the Muppets. The film required extensive blue screen shots and matte backgrounds. In the scene where Walter is running atop a dresser, the puppeteers perform Walter's choreography while wearing blue costumes against a blue screen. The result had the puppeteers completely gone from the final shot. A majority of the Muppet characters were also completely rebuilt for the film. The majority of the songs for the Muppets were written by Brett McKenzie, who previously worked with Bobbin on a television series based on McKenzie's band Flight of the Conchords. At the Muppets performers' behest, McKenzie rewrote lyrics where the characters directly referred to themselves as puppets. McKenzie also was informed during recording sessions with the performers that certain Muppets, such as chickens and penguins, do not speak and instead vocalize in onomatopoeic sounds. You gotta know this stuff. You gotta know if you're going to be making Muppet songs. Prior to the film's release, some past Muppet performers were reportedly critical about the film's portrayal of the characters. Retired Muppet performer Frank Oz initially disapproved of the script and thought that the earlier version was disrespectful toward the characters. After the film's release, he modified his earlier statement, saying, quote, "I thought the film was really sweet and fun, a little too safe, a little retro. I prefer more cutting edge in the Muppets. But to the Muppets, although they never really left, it's always been a kind of subculture. It's always been there in our popular culture a little bit. So I'm happy that people are happy." In 2011, Variety said, effortlessly blending wised-up, self-reflexive humor with old-fashioned, let's put on a show pizzazz, The Muppets is an unexpected treat. And in 2011, the New York Times said, how do you reboot an entertainment juggernaut that began to fade before most of its younger audience was born? In the case of the Muppets, you make a leap of faith and hope that the charm of these Jim Henson creations, which once flooded children's television and movies, remains irresistible. On that note, let's talk a little bit about 2011's The Muppets. This is probably the one leading in I'm the most familiar with, because I remember going to see this when it came out.
I did too. Yeah.
Liked the songs, got me into Flight of the Conchords a little bit for a while. So, yeah, I had never seen Flight of the Conchords before this movie. So, but I hadn't seen it in a number of years, and now coming back with all my Muppet knowledge that I've developed over the past 4 weeks, it's
a totally different movie, right?
Yeah, it's entertaining. I don't think it's as together as some of the Muppet Movie or Muppet Great Muppet Caper or even Treasure Island or anything like that. The thing that I kind of am annoyed by, and this seems to be a symptom of most of the Disney, post Disney merger Muppet things, is it definitely sidelines some of the good weirdo characters. They even make a joke in Muppets Most Wanted, which we'll talk about in a little bit, about Rizzo the Rat not appearing at all. And you're like, yeah, like Rizzo's fucking great.
True.
And like, you know, there's just like a bunch of like the weirdo side characters that don't really get much play, you know, like you add Walter, who's just a wet blanket of a character, along, and really they, you know, they have like Kermit and Fozzie and Miss Piggy, and even Gonzo's a little, like, he's not really given much to do. He didn't get to even be like a freak, you know, like I just got off of Treasure Island.
Very safe, Gonzo.
Yeah, I got off Treasure Island where he's just like a freak the entire time. But
craziest thing he does is try to throw a bowling ball at Jack Black's head.
Yeah, that's, you know, and then he just talks about doing an indoor running of the bulls the entire Muppets Most Wanted. So, but no, it's still fine. A lot of the you know, compared to a lot of the earlier movies, the celebrity cameos I feel like are a little bit more forced in this one. They don't have like that natural, you know, like thinking about like the Muppet movie, even though, you know, it's very much like, you know, Mel Brooks will show up or Steve Martin will show up, and it's very like it's this person, like there's kind of like a naturalness, and like they like at least give them like a scene to do something. And in this one, literally like John Krasinski is in this movie, never says a word, but just like literally like shows up.
He's just in the credit sequence.
Well, he's doing like the little like phone bank thing at the end, but it's never it goes, that's John Krasinski. It just kind of is like he's there, and you're like, well, like what's, you know, it's very, I don't feel like it utilizes those as well as past Muppet movies, but what, you know, as somebody devoted to the Muppets, what did you make of this one?
Well, bouncing off of that point about, you know, John Krasinski doesn't get a scene, I think that's indicative of just the way that Disney plays with nostalgia and recognition and celebrity in a way that's different than the way the Muppets used to. I think that for Disney, like pointing at the screen and saying, that's John Krasinski, is enough for it to be a joke, right? But I think that in Henson's Muppets, Krasinski would have to have a joke to warrant being in the movie. Right.
No, that's true. Like, you know, like we were talking off mic about how like various characters or various actors from Modern Family are popping up in this movie, and I can't think of a good reason that they're popping up other than they, you know, it's ABC, which is owned by Disney, right, which is doing the Muppets.
And Selena Gomez shows up, who's also like a Disney child star at the time. It just seems like Disney owns all this IP and like has all these connections with all these actors, and they're kind of bringing them in for the sake of there being celebrity cameos in the movie. And I know the celebrity cameos have been a hallmark of the Muppets for a long time, but again, they always do something with them. But I would say that like my general take on the movie is less concerned with that and less concerned with like how they honor the Muppets as characters, and more like how this movie feels like Disney propaganda to me. Like I gotta say, I find this movie a little despicable just because of how like shamelessly Disney propaganda it is. Like it's a very meta movie, right? It's about the Muppet Studio getting bought by a big evil businessman, and they have to make a lot of money in order to stay relevant. Otherwise, the big businessman is going to put them away forever. And like that's the story of what Disney did with the Muppets. Like they buy the Muppets and they're like, okay, we're going to give you guys one chance to pay it, like give us profit. And like in doing so sort of saps a lot of the heart and soul out of it. And like, it's weird to me that they cast, you know, the Tex Richman as the villain when they are Tex Richman. That is the studio, right? Like there's this weird, like false consciousness thing happening where the movie is asking us to, you know, hate the big evil corporation by like applauding the product of the big evil corporation. Like the movie also kind of positions fandom as like a moral good. Like if Walter was not an obsessive stan of the Muppets, he would not be able to save the Muppets. And by extension, if Jason Segel, the dude, not the character, was not a massive fan of the Muppets, he probably would not have been able to make this project happen. Right? So it's sort of presenting fandom as like a heroic act almost. And that is where the Disney propaganda stings the most for me, because I feel like since they have so fundamentally like shifted the balance of power in the market, they have also sort of been conditioning their audience to just kind of want and engage with movies on different levels. And that level primarily is like fandom and obsessive like merchandise buying and like these the pleasure of recognition. I understand that Easter egg. I got that joke. I know that character from this other thing. Like, this reminds me of my childhood. But there's no substance to the thing in of itself. It's all just the recognition. And that's kind of what this movie is too, I think.
Well, yeah, but that's pretty much what that's like Disney movies now is literally the joke that they make in the Avengers. Oh, I get that reference. That's literally every joke in every from the Marvel movies to the Star Wars movies to even like the animated output. Like it's funny, they make the joke in Muppets Most Wanted at the beginning, like, we got to make a sequel while the studio waits for Tom Hanks to agree to do Toy Story 4, and it's like, yeah, like that's that's kind of what that's the gauge of everything. Everything is all meta, everything's all referential, and if you saw this one thing and remember it when they make a reference to it in this thing, then that's the joke. That's the joke.
Though I don't know if we want to transition to Muppets Most Wanted yet or not, but when they make the joke about, we're getting a sequel while they wait for Tom Hanks to do Toy Story 4, that sounds like an actual jab at Disney's business practices on the part of the people writing that movie. And less,
I didn't get a third movie, so
Disney playing defense for itself, Yeah.
No, and I think I saw something you wrote, mentioning this, and it was reminding me of like my feelings toward the most recent Spider-Man movie, which I talked about on the podcast, but like it's this movie of bringing in these villains and characters and stuff from other Spider-Man movies that were not Disney related, Disney Marvel related. It was mainly like, Sony, and like co-opting them within the Disney Marvel mold, and like literally on the part of the villains, fixing the villains so that, even though you have like, if you watch the like Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, Alfred Molina's an incredible performance, like Willem Dafoe's an incredible, like those are great performances as villains, and they like fix them in this Disney Marvel machine of Spider-Man, and like to me that was just such a despicable, inexcusable, like gross movie, because they've already come full circle of like ruining Spider-Man as a character, but now they're like fixing movies, like better versions of that character from other, yeah, and like, and to me, and like I think that's kind of the what you're getting at with the Muppets is it's like taking like a base familiarity with how the Muppets operate and plastering it on to a Disney product.
And when they plaster on a Disney product, they kind of defang it a little bit. Like, I agree with Frank Oz in that quote that you read where he says, like, I prefer the Muppets to be a little more edgy, a little more daring. So, for example, there's a scene where Jack Black is wheeled on stage and a bunch of Muppets sing Smells Like Teen Spirit, and they're holding up like towels that have the lyrics of Smells Like Teen Spirit on it, and you have Beaker hold up when the line "my libido" shows up, he's holding up like me or whatever, and that moment just kind of made me realize, like, all of a sudden, like, oh, this is like a weirdly censored Muppet movie, because so many of the other ones have had Muppets who fuck, like they've been real edgy and real weird, and like these Muppets are so straight-laced and vanilla that there's just, it doesn't have the same spirit to it. It feels like we're just, selling merch at Disney World.
See, you couldn't have Charles Grodin in this Muppets because he would want to fuck Miss Piggy, and they'd be like, no, this is Disney Muppets. You can't fuck Miss Piggy. Yeah, and I think I have a little bit of part in the notes. It's funny, like Jason Segel is like kind of this like force behind, like, hey, we should make this, and then like makes this movie. It's super successful. It does really well, and then just kind of like ditches it. Like I was trying to do some research on like why he didn't at least like cameo in the Muppets Most Wanted, and he literally was like, yeah, we talked about it. I didn't want to. At that time he was doing some rom-com, like one of his kind of art, when he was doing the R-rated like Nicholas Stoller, like the rom-coms and stuff, and he was like, yeah, I want to focus on this. I like, pretty much he was like, I worked on the Muppets for like 6 or 7 years because I wanted to see that happen, and then it happened and I was good, and then I left, and it's just it was kind of a weird, for somebody who like I feel like was the big force behind going, hey, like we should bring this back. He kind of like did it and was just like, all right, peace. And then
I wonder if he was happy with the finished product.
Yeah, I don't know. It's maybe he kind of felt the same way as we're talking about now, where he kind of was like, yeah, I would have liked to make it more in line with the Muppet movies I remember growing up, or just the show in general. And that's just, with Disney holding the keys, it's impossible.
I wonder if he is front and center in this movie for a lot of it, just because Disney needs there to be a human face to market the movie with. Because his character is nothing, like contributes nothing to the movie. His romance with Amy Adams does not need to be in this movie.
No, really.
Like, they almost forget he exists after a certain point.
They kind of do. At some point, they just kind of, once they get all the Muppets together, they're like, all right, whatever, y'all.
Bye.
Yeah, it's a very, because thinking about like the human characters again, like in previous Muppets movies, they're always like kind of either helping out the Muppet, or like usually like a little bit more like antagonistic to degree. You think of like Charles Grodin in Great Muppet Caper. You think about like Tim Curry in Treasure Island. Like those are always the best Muppet. I mean, honestly, I really like in this movie Chris Cooper's performance as Tex Richmond is really fun.
That's the best part. Yeah. I was actually, when the movie started and like through that whole title sequence, I noticed myself not laughing. I'm like, when is this movie going to make me laugh? What's going to be the first laugh? And the first laugh was Chris Cooper saying the words maniacal laugh.
Maniacal laugh. Well, and it's like Chris Cooper, who like is a very like, generally serious, dramatic actor, having the goddamn time of his life with this one. I mean, he raps in this movie.
When he does the rap, yeah.
Like, it's great.
I love it, yeah.
You think of like Chris Cooper as like the dad in American Beauty, and then it's like now he's rapping with some Muppets, and then the two.
I like the Chris Cooper jokes. I also like the travel by map jokes, but for the most part, this movie is real low on humor for me. I think it tries to make the Muppets maybe like more schmaltzy and sentimental than they are. Like there's emotional stuff in some of the Muppet movies, but there's usually kind of a wink to it. And this like very much wants us to take seriously, the plight of Walter.
God, I don't care about Walter
and the Muppet Studio. Yeah.
I did also like that, like, Gonzo has, like, the successful company, and they're like, hey, you want to come join the Muppets? And he just explodes it.
Yes. What is the name of his company? It's something kind of funny.
It's something with toilets, like
Gonzo's Great Plunge or something like that.
I don't know. I like Gonzo. He's a little freak. He's enjoyable. and he gets, you know, between him and you lose him and Rizzo, who are deeply entertaining in Treasure Island.
Right, yeah.
It's just,
have you seen Christmas Carol?
no, I was gonna watch it though.
You should.
I might wait.
So Gonzo plays Charles Dickens, who's like narrating the story to you, and he just has Rizzo playing himself, walking around and like making commentary about Christmas Carol, and it's fantastic.
I might have to watch that next Christmas. You know, get in the Christmas mood by watching that, just because I'm like, I do like Rizzo and Gonzo.
Right.
Rizzo entertains.
Yeah, that's their best role, I think. That was also Muppets from Space. There was a lot of Gonzo content.
Yeah. I also like Pepe. He entertains me too.
Muppets from Space is the best Pepe movie. A lot of good Pepe.
He was good, and he was good. He was like the highlight of Wizard of Oz. So that's, you know,
oh man,
it's just Pepe. But you want to move on to Muppets Most Wanted? We've talked about it, you know, but we can more directly. So Muppets Most Wanted. 2014. It was also directed by James Bobbin, from a script by Bobbin and Nicholas Stoller. The film stars Ricky Gervais, Ty Burrell, Tina Fey, Kermit the Frog, Constantine, Miss Piggy, Fozzie Bear, Sam Eagle, and Walter. Dominic Badguy, or Badguy, it's French, the Muppets' new manager, convinces the gang to embark on a world tour. Kermit the Frog doubts that it's a good idea, a feeling that's proven right when look-alike Constantine escapes from prison, takes Kermit's place, and lands Miss Piggy's sweetie in a Siberian prison. While the Frog tries to convince his captors of his true identity, Constantine and Dominic are free to carry out their plan to steal London's crown jewels. In March 2012, after the critical and commercial success of The Muppets, Walt Disney Studios negotiated a deal with Bobbin and Stoller to direct and write, respectively, an 8th installment of the Muppets franchise. Along with Brian Henson, Bobbin is the only other person to have directed 2 Muppet films. Jason Segel, co-writer and star of the previous film, declined any involvement with the 8th entry, citing that he had accomplished his ambition of bringing the characters to the forefront with the 2011 film. Bobbin said that the film was, quote, a tip of the hat to the old-school crime capers of the 1960s, but featuring a frog, a pig, a bear, and a dog. No panthers, even pink ones, along with the usual Muppety mix of mayhem, music, and laughs. In 2014, The Guardian said, while this may lack the emotional clout of the Muppets star co-writer Jason Segel's original reboot, leading man Ricky Gervais doesn't really do feelings. It doesn't skimp on good old-fashioned variety entertainment. The bizarre and unforeseeable topicality of putting on a show in a Siberian gulag overseen by a trench-coated Tina Fey merely adds to the air of surreal anarchy. Ignore Statler and Waldorf and just enjoy. And in 2014, Variety said, from the first bars of We're Doing a Sequel, an opening number that shamelessly acknowledges the inevitability and inferiority of most movie follow-ups, this 8th feature showcase of Jim Henson's deeply felt creations pokes fun at itself in a way that seems self-deflating rather than cheekily inspired. If its predecessor was more sheer fun than a Muppet movie had any right to be, then this is the picture that, like comparable box office success aside, will cement a new generation's notions of what this durable Disney franchise more typically has to offer. Toe-tapping, moderately appealing family entertainment, easy to smile at, and even easier to turn off after 20 minutes.
Wow. Harsh.
Yeah, Justin Chang did not like Muppets Most Wanted.
I really like Muppets Most Wanted. It's like insane to me that this is directed by the same guy and also written by one of the same guys, because it feels so different from The Muppets 2011. I don't. Did you have more things in your fact sheet, Zach, or are you good?
No, that's all. That's it. No, I think I wonder, going back to what we were talking about before, I wonder, that first Muppet movie was just kind of like, hey, they're bankable, and then this one, which didn't do nearly as well at the box office, was kind of like, yeah, you have a little bit more of a free check on this one because the first one was successful.
This seems more like they are trying to do it the way that Henson's crew would have wanted to do it, as opposed to the way that Disney needed to like have it perfectly prim and proper for their audience. It feels to me more like a sequel to The Great Muppet Caper than a sequel to The Muppets 2011. Like, it involves a long con that is happening. It involves a human who has like an unhealthy obsession with a Muppet, with Tina Fey and Kermit. It's globetrotting all over the place. It's a genre pastiche. And it's just like so densely packed with jokes in a way that Muppets 2011 did not feel like it was to me. And this is among the Muppet movies that I think is funniest, that makes me laugh the most. It's also maybe like one of the best batches of songs in any Muppet movie. Like, We're Doing a Sequel is great. I'm Number One is really fun. I fucking love Constantine's I Can Give You Anything You Want disco thing. We were talking at the beginning of the episode about like just the sheer hilarity of hearing a actor doing an impression of a Russian character doing an impression of Kermit the Frog badly. But to add another layer to that, it's an actor doing an impression of a Russian criminal doing an impression of Kermit badly, doing an impression of a disco crooner. Like, but you can kind of hear all the layers of that. And it's a good song. Yeah.
It's an incredible voice performance.
So I just think this movie is a ton of fun, and I do have like a couple of small critiques with it, but they're quibbles compared to like, you know, the way in which the problems of the Muppets 2011 run real deep for me.
Yeah, this one, I think, you know, talking about like the Muppets 2011 didn't utilize cameos well. This one legitimately does utilize cameos well. I mean,
for sure.
At one point, Christoph Waltz waltzes, you know, like that's a fucking Muppet thing to do. Like, is to have Christoph Waltz waltz.
That's the thing that would happen on the Muppet Show. Yeah.
It was funny. I was looking. I guess Christoph Waltz was initially supposed to play the Ty Burrell character, but then, you know, he had scheduling conflicts, and so he could only do the cameo. But I do like Ricky Gervais less is like going for it, but Ty Burrell and Tina Fey are both really fun in this movie because they're like you know, Tina Fey, you have her who's obsessed with Kermit the Frog and is playing this gulag prison person or whatever, but then like I really liked Ty Burrell, who plays this Interpol agent who has just, you know, the most hilariously bad French accent because why not, but also like one of his like character things is that, you know, they have like a better system of, you know, work-life balance, and so like he's constantly like taking like 6-hour lunch breaks. At one point he like his like family appears with him and he goes to take a 6-month vacation. Like, I just like that that's one of his like things compared to Sam the Eagle CIA agent, which is, oh no, I have ample time off and can have a good work-life balance.
Okay, so here's my biggest quibble with Muppets Most Wanted, and it is that there is a latent conservatism to it. Like, you and I can look at Ty Burrell's 6-hour lunch break and think like, hell yeah, dude, where's my 6-hour lunch break? But the way that's being framed in the movie, and specifically through the lens of Sam the Eagle, is like, look at these lazy Europeans.
Yeah.
And like, Sam the Eagle in the Henson Muppets was always an object of mockery. Like, he is the embodiment of all of America's like most arrogant qualities. And they kind of play with that with the whole like the dick measuring contest of like whose badge is bigger. Like, that's real funny.
I do like that as well.
But like, for Sam the Eagle to like never be the butt of a joke outside of that seems to me to speak to like the political proclivities of the Disney Corporation. where when we're talking about other countries, we always have to make it seem as though America is superior to like their, socialism or whatever.
I mean, that dude got a 6-hour lunch. I don't know who's he's 100% the winner there. But no, I think they utilize the cameos a lot better, and then I just think that there's much more fun and like silly performances out of the main characters, sans Ricky Gervais, who I just don't feel like ever. I didn't feel like the pairing of like what that character is and what he does really makes sense. It's less like Ricky Gervais's fault and more he's miscast.
I will say that I think that Ricky Gervais is a pompous dickwad in real life, right? But
he's not even really like that bad in this, and then they kind of like do this whole thing where he's like, he feels slighted as the number 2. And I thought that was going to become something, and it really didn't. It shows up with him in a lemur costume, which is kind of weird.
It's kind of him being embarrassed the entire time, which I appreciate watching that happen. I like the humiliation of Ricky Gervais.
That's good, yeah.
I like a Russian Kermit putting him into his place. Which, we talked about the hilarity of the voice, but also Constantine is just an incredible character. Like, I'm so glad he was included in the cast of this movie. What a great Muppet creation Constantine is.
I love that the plot point with him is that the other Muppets can't tell that he's not Kermit because he has like a mole, but then they like cover it up. Like I liked it because it was like it was literally like like an Austin Powers level joke.
Well, it's like the joke in Caper about Fozzie and Kermit being identical twins, and they kind of do a similar thing in the Muppets 2011 in the opening sequence, where Walter and Jason Segel's character say, like, we look so similar, we could be twins. But, like, the joke is not constructed in a way that actually gets a laugh in the way that it is in the other two movies we're talking about.
No, I just love in Muppets Most Wanted where Kermit, finally is just like, I'm a little upset, kind of, that y'all couldn't tell that we were like there was, and literally like Fozzie's sitting there like with the paper and is going, "Oh, Kermit! Oh, who's
so funny, man?"
He's just like, Kermit. Oh, that's not Kermit. Kermit.
I also like Kermit historically has been such an expressive character, despite the fact that the actual design of his puppet is very simple, but the Henson and the other people who have played Kermit have done a great job of like creating these like really subtle nuances of like the way that his mouth is curved around to like show different expressions, and they get a whole new palette of those with Constantine. Like the way that his mouth is like all crinkled up on the like wanted ad on that newspaper is really funny to me.
I really like my first favorite Constantine moment is when he switched places and he's supposed to do the like intro and like gets stage fright and just dies. It's just like hanging there like a dead puppet, like as they like start the show. Like it's not even like he like flies off. It's just he's just like huh.
Yeah, and he's like, I got the
just
vertigo.
Like lays there. It was not stage fright. No, it's this one I think is just like much more like, even though they want to say like the Muppets 2011 was much like more playful. I'm like, no, this is way more playful and way more silly. Like this is just like you have like just the whole Siberian gulag is entertaining because you have Tina Fey there, but then like as the prisoners you have Ray Liotta, Jermaine Clement, and Danny Trejo.
Yeah, Danny Trejo as himself. They were just referring to him as Danny Trejo. Stuck in
She's
a
like, good night,
prison.
Danny Trejo. like just just the whole like when they're doing the talent show and they have the different music numbers among the inmates. Not as good as Hugh Grant in Paddington 2 with his musical there, among the inmates, but it's pretty fun.
I also love that the Welcome to the Big House musical number Like, I think they get a lot of fun visuals out of these musical sequences in a way that I don't think they really do with Muppets 2011.
Yeah, this one's a much more like visual, visual movie. Even you have the song at the very end where they're like all stuck on the frozen wall and like kind of playing off of that. Like like they get a lot more. They're much again. It's much more like they're able to do a little bit more. They seem watching this after watching 2011 is like, oh, like they seem less restricted
for sure
in this.
Muppets Unchained.
Just do they can do whatever the hell they want.
I wish they would. I wish Disney would just give some Muppet people money to keep making Muppet movies like this. But I guess we're done with that.
Yeah, they brought back the guy who did Haunted Mansion.
Yeah, it sucks.
Well, he was the one who did Wizard of Oz. It was fucking terrible.
Oh, really? That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's just kind of, you're like, eh. Also, like, who's like, what in the pop culture zeitgeist, who's talking about Haunted Mansion?
No, that's not a Christmas Carol level text. By the way, if people want to hear us talk extensively about Muppets Haunted Mansion, Jesse and I reviewed it on, I think, the episode of the show. We also talked about Shrek 3, which itself is a trip. So go check that out if you want.
Honestly, just an all-around great episode to listen to. Any final thoughts that you want to share about the Muppet series at large, as somebody who's participated and listened? I don't know. Have you felt like you've gained new appreciation or understanding?
I guess I'm more curious to hear you answer that question, Zach, because you had not seen any of these features except for Caper, I think, right? So watching them all through chronologically and kind of getting a sense of the broader opus that is the Muppets, like what are your I don't know, what's your general sense of them now?
I enjoy them. It was a lot of Muppets to watch in a month, I'll be honest. They're fun. I don't think I'm gonna go and like just inundate myself with the Muppets. That's why I'm like, I'll watch Christmas Carol around Christmas.
Right. Give it some time.
But no, they're fine. They're entertaining. I struggle a little bit with coming up with stuff to talk about with the Muppets, but
Yeah, I mean, because the end goal most of the time is just like fun and humor. So there's not always like a lot of deep analysis to get into. It's just like, did you find this part funny or did you not? And like what it comes down to with these two movies to me is like Muppets Most Wanted is real funny. That is a really funny movie. I'm glad they made another funny one.
Yeah, before they just started hawking random Disney rides for Disney Plus. Yeah. All right, well, that will wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter and Instagram at handles @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we list all the movies that we talked about in this episode. If you'd like to support the show, if you're like, we want more Muppets, well, we'll do a Patreon series, and you can give us, $1 and say we want more Muppets. But you can do that at patreon.com/Cinematary. Thank you so much to our patrons: Cam, Chad Newsom, Candace Sisson, Ron Hayes, Teresa Marsathi, Titus Arthur, and Tyler Chandler. Thank you so much for your patronage. Next week, we don't know what our series is going to be. We're literally going to decide that in like an hour or so after we stop recording this episode. Inside baseball. Mm-hmm. But we'll tweet it out and put it on the website. So look for it there. But until next week.